Hello and welcome everybody to Around the Battleground. My name is LHS, as always, and I'm your host. Joining me again today is Mr. JMac. How you doing, JMac?
Oh, just another day on the battleground.
Today is our last show before LAN hits, so we're gonna do a little bit of a recap for everything going into tomorrow. Probably going to be a bit of a shorter show with everybody kind of getting ready for LAN, already at LAN, everything like that. We're going to uh, probably have just a little bit of a shorter show, keep it nice and sweet. And then what I was sorry, I got distracted here by the place of the card at the bottom there. What I meant was I wasn't able to really get a guest. The only guest that I was able to really talk to had some scheduling conflicts, and we'll probably be getting him for next week. And then next week, we'll be able to talk a little bit more about what happened with placements this week. So I promise we're trying to get as much content as we can out to you guys. It's just a little hard right now, given the state of things going into LAN, how hectic it is. So before we kind of go into NACE, the one thing I want to talk about during our intro is JMac. The biggest change going into the placement rounds right now, the biggest news, last week we had Dimmy being added to SSG.
Right.
This week we got word that Pretty Prime, the mid laner for Obey, is more than likely not going to be making it out to the LAN due to the birth of his child, and is going to be replaced by Filippo.
Yeah. Flippo.
Flippo. There we go. Flippo. Sorry, Flippo. My bad. Flippo being the mid laner for Sacred Speed buff, being around in the SML for a little while now. This is a pretty big deal going into the placement rounds, is it not?
I mean, this is pretty significant to the placement rounds. I personally don't really think that this is going to have a massive impact on the Obey roster, though Pretty Prime has been one of the forerunners for this team, kind of one of the pace setters more than anything else. But I mean, they picked up probably one of the best mid laners in the EU SML, in my opinion, onto that one. I've seen Flippo at the top of his game constantly over the course of the last year and a half, almost 2 years now.
Yeah, Flippo, most recently being on Sacred Speed buff, a team that kind of had flashes of being really, really nice, but never really put it together. But he was a part of that New Game Plus squad last year with Game Hunter, Murder, Repicos. They came in first for a couple of the splits in CC, and then didn't quite make it up in through relegations to the SPL. But still looked pretty nice while he was down there. Definitely showing his prowess in the mid lane, being one of the stronger names, even if Sacred Speedoff didn't quite make it to the top of the minor league this year. It'll be really interesting to see how he kind of steps and what kind of role they put Flippo on, just because, like you said, Pretty Prime is really important for this Obey squad. There's a lot of play that goes through him and his ability just to play the game. I mean, you could say single-handedly Obey and Pretty Prime brought Zeus back into the meta, kicking and screaming. Like, his ability to play that god over the year has really been a strong point for this team, and it's been a power pick. Do you think that Flippo's god pool is going to enable Obey to really not miss too much as they move forward?
I think so. I mean, looking at Flippo's God pool over the course of the last year and a half or so here, he's got a fairly similar not only God pool but play style to Pretty Prime. Vulcan and Isis were two of his big gods last season. Whenever I was watching him back in the Challenger circuit, and he's done nothing but expand since then. His gameplay has always been very mindful of his opponents. He's never really been one to be overly aggressive, trying to, single-handedly steal buffs away or anything really crazy. I think that of the mid laners out there, he's probably going to fit the best in because his playstyle and god pool are so similar to Pretty Prime.
I think there's a lot of talent to be picked up for this mid lane pick, especially in EU right now. The mid laner position is pretty strong out there. I mean, he had his choice of a lot of, like, Death Panther comes to mind, being brought up from another team into him or something like that. We've seen crazier things, right? So having them pick Flippo is a big news for him, and like I really like it
Mhm.
because one of the things we've constantly said about EU Smite is that it is kind of the bigger boys club out of both scenes. And you've got people who've been playing together for forever, and those rosters really aren't changing all that much. And if they do, it's largely the same people kind of moving around. And so this is the chance for one of the guys who's been outside of that boys club to kind of come in and make a name for himself. So I'm really interested to see if he can live up to the hype, or if he's gonna crumble underneath the pressure. Nobody would blame him if he does. But do you think that Obey with this change can still make it out of these placement rounds, or is their run kind of already decided?
I don't think they're out of it entirely, but I wouldn't say that they sealed a spot like previously with Pretty Prime. I mean, back when we talked about EU, we were pretty much both in conclusion that Obey was going to make it out of here. I don't think it's as decisive now. I think that they're going to have to fight a little bit harder than they previously would have with Flippo joining in. I don't think that they're out of it entirely. I think that they still have a very strong shot at it, but I think that it is going to take a little bit more work and a lot more effort than originally planned for them.
Okay. What happens, long shot here? What happens if Flippo just absolutely goes off, turns into a massive Lanimal, and goes just puts up crazy numbers in the absence of Pretty Prime, and just becomes the MVP for this Obey roster? What do you think happens after that? Pretty Prime just comes back
Uh,
and kicks it back off, or does Obey kind of have a really tough decision here?
I think Go Bay would have a tough decision going into the LAN. Obviously, they'd probably favor their original mid laner, but I mean, assuming that if he can go off and become the Lanimal that we would love to see, I imagine at least in the first game or so at Worlds, if Pretty Prime can't make it to the DreamHack finals, still to this point, if he's able to make his way there, I imagine they'll at least give Flippo a chance. If it doesn't work out in game number one, they can always bring their star mid laner back. But I think moving forward, even ahead of DreamHack, ahead of LAN beyond that point, that's where we really got to start asking is if Flippo goes off and becomes this Obey MVP, this could open up the door for a potential SPL roster spot come next season.
Absolutely. It's one of those things where, as lovers of the game, I love Obey. I don't want to see Pretty Prime go anywhere. But like objectively, looking at it,
Mhm.
I would say, it'd be really cool to see one of these bottom guys, quote unquote bottom guys, kind of come in and show his worth and really give these top teams, like, hey, we can belong here too. Just give us a chance.
Mhm.
So uh, it'll that those are games that I'm really interested in watching, just for the stated reasons above. And these placement rounds are really shaping up to be like a really cool event, and I can't wait. And we're going to talk about that, but first, uh the bigger news for me right now is the NACE finally got their finalists, their grand finalists. RIT got 2-0'd by Carlton, and it was a really one-sided game. Really, Carlton really came out to play, and they're looking really strong. Do you think this Carlton squad can really put the screws to Meerkat's team and maybe walk away with the win at DreamHack?
I think so. I mean, earlier in the season, Carlton just looked like another one of those, kind of top teams that had their, we talked extensively last week about kind of their faults, but this week they really turned up. I mean, they really showed up to play this last matchup here, and they had nothing but fire in their eyes, ready to go to that LAN. And I think that going up against this undefeated Illinois squad, because that's an important point going into it, is Illinois is completely undefeated, haven't dropped a game all season long, and now they've been sitting, I can't say sitting and doing nothing this whole time, but they've been essentially just sitting back and watching gameplay, watching matches that have been going through. Any game that's been streamed, Carlton's been on the stream a couple of times as of recently. So they're watching here. Illinois has been watched by all of the teams. And going into it, I think that this could be a potential. It is going to be a best of three grand finals. I did have that confirmed with Cooper and Overin. And in this best of three grand finals, I think that this easily has potential to go all three, and this could really go either way. I don't see this being a one-sided finals by any means.
One of the biggest things, we touched on last week, the weaknesses that we saw with Carlton being their early game focus. And, maybe we've been looking at this the wrong way. I mean, they're so focused and committed to that early game, but you look last year at Worlds, that's what that E United had that same strategy, and they ended up walking away easily with the Smite World Championship. So uh, maybe we should maybe applaud, instead of digging at it. But do you think that this Carlton strategy of being so early focused is going to be the way that earns them this victory, or do you think Meerkat's team is going to be a little more prepared and able to weather that storm and honestly just punish that early game aggression and turn it into late game team fights?
I think so. I mean, I don't see really any of these games going less than probably 28 to 30 minutes. I think that Carlton is going to try and punish and get this early game that they have been for every single match they've gone up to. And Meerkat and the boys of Illinois, they're just going to do what they've done the whole time. They're just going to let the game play out. They've been notorious for just playing the pace of the game, whatever pace they want it to be. If they want it to be a slow game, they'll stay back, they'll send a tower. If they want to be in your face, punching you in the gut right away, they'll do so. They'll put they'll put Berg and Meerkat on two very aggressive early game gods who have strong push, strong jungle clear. That way they can start invading your buffs, getting kills in the mid lane or making early rotations to dual lane. We saw a few of those by Carleton University. That was their stretch to try and get those early pressure in game, was making early rotations to dual lane, stealing away the red buff on, constantly, almost. I think Vince said it best. Their dedication to stealing a red buff away is almost to a fault, because it's just one of their go-tos of, if we take this red buff, we slow down the mid lane, we slow down the jungler with that, and that in turn will start slowing down the rest of the map. So I think here is really just going to be, how does Illinois adapt to Carleton's playstyle as they have for the rest of their opponents?
You're touching on really good points. Carlton, the way that they're able to kind of build those early leads are through the invades, are getting the buff. And one of the things that really cements their leads early, if you watch their games, is they always send the jungler to gank duo very early. It's a play they've run every single game, and they always seem to get Pater on it. That's something that Meerkat's not going to miss, right? That's something that his team's going to be prepared for. Do you think that because of their commitment to play one style, that it's going to really bite them in the long run, and Meerkat's just going to be prepared and ready to counter that? Do you think we'll see Meerkat starting at their own buff to try to deny the vision, the timers, and everything? Like, if you're Meerkat and you see this early aggressive squad always going for buffs, winning off of these invades, how do you fight that?
I think that they just draft the composition that can go up against it very heavily. If Carleton wants to do this early game, gank early, take buffs early as possible, draft gods, draft compositions that don't lose out in lane very early. Don't pick low clear dual lanes to where you would have to be forced under tower or forced to choose the buff or the lane at that time. And then in turn, now your red buff is up for contention. I think that Illinois' best answer is just going to be doing what Meerkat has done all season, which is play two to three gods who have some kind of global pressure coupled alongside Berg, whether it be Thor, Ratatosker for Berg, and then you throw somebody like Morgan or Chernabog for Meerkat. Between those two players, that's four different gods they have access to really try and control the early stage of the game with those rotations. We saw it in the RIT matchup where it was Chernabog versus Morgan. Chernabog goes all the way over there. All right, well, Morgan transforms into Chernabog and comes all the way over to the side of the map. And that was a lot of the reaction that we're going to see. From what I've noticed, Meerkat's team isn't really a reactive team. They're a proactive team. They know that a rotation is going to come. So because they're seeing that Carleton is doing this kind of same strategy, they're going to know, okay, well, Carleton's going to want to be on our red buff all game long. So what are we going to do? We're just going to be at our red buff before the timer is even up for it. So if they try and come to it, we got 3 or 4 people waiting for them. Because one thing I did notice is it's not just 1 or 2 players coming for that red buff. Oftentimes it's 3 or 4. The entire jungle, mid, and dual lane are rotating over for that red buff. Sometimes they get it. There was a couple times where they actually ended up missing out just by like one little basic attack or something. But I think that the style that Meerkat's team has been playing, this Morgan or Chernabog mid coupled with some kind of semi-global or global jungler, is the perfect composition that they need to where they don't really have to adapt to the playstyle of Carleton.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's a very delicate dance between these two teams because if Meerkats team UI UIUC, right? Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. If they kind of sit back too long, then the lead's going to be too big, and they're going to be missing out. They're going to be getting hit hard. If they try to fight into it too early, and they don't have the right comp, they're going to get smacked around because of the comp. All that. There's a lot of different things, and then
Mhm.
maybe Carlton's going to surprise us all by changing up their draft strategy. They've been picking all this one way because it has been maybe against competition they didn't really respect. This Carlton team is pretty experienced. They're a veteran team. They've been around for a while. They've been playing together for a while. I mean, we've got Masters levels players in this team. Maybe they've only been playing the all-out early aggression because they know they can get away with it. That they, all like the CC strategy back in the day was all about the, pre 15 minutes. They're trying to build as big a lead as possible and then just kind of swinging your lead around. Do you think there is a possibility that we see Carlton kind of break something else out, or Carlton is the beast that we know it that they are, and they're going to just stay true to that?
I think that they're going to have a secondary strategy, but I don't think they're going to break it out immediately. I think that they're going to try. I personally think it looks like they're going to try the same strategy they have been game number one. And if it doesn't work out and they say, okay, well, that strat, throw it out the window. Let's bring in plan B, what we've been practicing, because they don't need to practice plan A anymore. They've been doing it all season long. Plan A has been on the forefront the whole time, this entire NACE season. So practice plan B over these next 2 weeks, or even it could be even longer that they've been practicing a plan B, but haven't needed it because plan A's just been working the entire time. I can't imagine that this is a one trick team with how many big names and how many, high level players on this team are. I can't imagine that this is a one trick pony here. And to the same extent for Meerkat squad, they're no one trick either. They do have a lot of flexibility with their god pools, especially Meerkat in that mid lane can play just about anything that he wants. He can play any god, and then you throw Morgan. Now he can play any god that he wants to going up against it. And we talk a lot about the mid, the jungle, and the duo, but the solo lane matchup as well is going to be one that I'm really looking at, which is Khan versus Lime Time. Both players who like to be very aggressive and play those hyper kill style solo lanes. Usually Baron Samdi is something that comes to mind for Lime Time, especially, but for Khan, I'm looking at RTO being one of the big contention matchups between these two teams. I can see RTO being one of the first 2 to 3 gods picked up because Khan has been playing it religiously in solo lane and just bullying anybody he goes up against with it. And then to the flip side there, David de Bergerac has a very strong RTO himself. Lime Time has a good RTO. And then the Baron Samdi. I think between those two gods, we're going to see a lot of fighting for that solo and even possibly support role.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The RDO pick is going to be strong, and it's a pick that both teams really like. It's such a weird thing to even think about because I put myself in both these teams' shoes. Like, how do you run these pick bands? It's so hard because, both teams will play the top stuff that's left open, but their bread and butter really isn't stuff that you're seeing really picked and banned too often. So it's kind of hard to really nail that down. But at the end of the day here, who do you think wins this grand finals? Who finishes first and gets the
Mm,
grand prize money here?
man, I knew you were going to get to me on that. And honestly, I really can't make a hard hitting decision onto it because these are the two teams that have had a playstyle that haven't really had a chance to go up against each other. You know, uh, talking like Georgia Tech versus them. We've seen what Georgia Tech can do against Illinois. We've seen what RIT could do against Illinois. We've seen what almost every team could do up against this Carlson squad, but Illinois. That was the original kind of dream first round finals matchup. That was kind of the dream winners bracket matchup. And then to see, the losers sit there at the end and then possibly make their way into the LAN from that one. Um, but when it comes down to it, if Carlton can bring a plan B, if they show up, their plan A fails and they move to plan B, if they've got a plan B, I think that Carlton can take this in a 2-1, but I don't think that either of these teams are going to be 2-0'd by the other one.
I don't know. I think I could definitely see UIUC walking away with a 2-0. I think if Carlton wins, it'll be a 2-1. And the reasoning behind that is I do think that Carlton is going to lean on the strategy they've been doing. We're going to see Carlton be Carlton. They're not going to really change out from there. And I really just think that strategy isn't going to be enough to really carry them further against this Meerkat team, just based on how they play, the picks that they have. I think that the pick bands for Meerkat's team are going to be excellent. Meerkat has a lot more experience in like the competitive setting there. Uh, Carlton does have their own coach, but just based on like me going up against them, I felt like I had pretty good drafts against them. The only thing being execution at that point. And I think you hit the nail on the head on why I pick Meerkat's team and why my team wasn't able to win is that Meerkat's team, UIUC, is a proactive team. RIT for for their entire history has been a reactive team. They don't make generally the first Gold Fury call. They don't go after objectives hard. They react. They get kills. Oh, now we can do Gold Fury. They do all of that. They're never pushing it forward. They're kind of doing one wave at a time. And that's why, ganking the duo lane at 2 minutes is going to get patered a lot of the time. So I think because that we have all this film on Carlton, that UIUC is going to be able to look at that and be like, all right, I know who these guys are. I know what to expect. And then they can game plan around that and be proactive. So I think we're either going to see a 2-0, maybe a 2-1 in favor of UIUC at the end.
Okay, so we're kind of on the same spectrum, but on the opposite sides of it, at least. So if it is a 2-0, I don't think Carlton will 2-0. I think I can agree to you on that one, that if it's a 2-0, it would be in favor of Illinois. But if it's a 2-1, I can see it going either direction onto it. My swing a little bit more towards Carlton, just depending on, like I said, what is their plan B? And then after the plan B is done, do they have a plan C, possibly? That's kind of one thing is, even though it's only 3 games, you don't want to throw all your cards on the table and be like, okay, well, that card trick worked, but now they can draft against that kind of a card trick. And the thing that UIUC has over Illinois is Meerkat. And I'm not saying Meerkat as a player being better. I'm saying the connections that Meerkat has are, they've got to be vast, superior to what Carlton can get, because Meerkat was the former sub for E United. So he has any of the E United guys that he wants to grab to go scrims against, any of the former pros, any of the current pro teams. I mean, he has so many options available to him for scrimming and coaching and any kind of improvement that he wants that Carlton doesn't have at the moment. So I think because they have all of that access, it's what's going to kind of give them a little bit more of an edge.
Yeah, I think I agree. Like, that was one of the things I actually got to a casual game against most of the Carlton team a couple days before we actually played them, and I was playing with Clout Vedium from Luminosity, and he was our ADC. And so I just get a message at the we win in the post game lobby. We just get a message like, when did Clout transfer to RIT? So those connections definitely go a long way. And unfortunately, like we just weren't able to really push that far just because of our experience gap. But you see constantly Meerkat being talking with PBM and things like that. And there's that team is definitely in high level scrims or in-houses or whatever, right? So I think that's just another thing in Meerkat's favor, UIUC just having all of those connections and experience, and that's what's going to give them a leg up. So that's it for NACE. Next up, we're going to get to our bread and butter, the placement rounds starting tomorrow. Let's look at all the teams again who made it to the placement rounds. We have for North America, Space Station Gaming, Trifecta, Counterlogic Gaming, Luminosity, and Armana, the SML team. For Europe, we have Obey Alliance, Team Rival, Mouse Esports, SK Gaming, and Insignum, their SML team. And then for the international teams, we have Lotto Gaming, Nocturnes, No Ping, Athletico, and Get On My Level. And let's go ahead and look at what the bracket is as well, so we can see who's going to be playing who. We've got Luminosity going up against the winner of Nocturne's Lotto, Trifecta going up against Insignum. We have Mouse Esports going against Get On My Level, SK against No Ping, Rival against Armada, and Counterlogic Gaming versus Athletico. And so we've talked about all of these matchups several times. We've broken down the bracket a bunch. Let's kind of retread. Which one of these first round games are you looking forward to the most? If you had to look at one that you could only watch one of these games, which one would it be?
Ooh. If I can only watch one, I'm probably looking at LG and Nocturne's Lotto. That's probably my go-to game, and then right after that is SK No Ping. I think the LATAM and Brazil games that are going to be taking place in this first round are probably the two that I'm looking at. If it's just one, I'm looking at LG and then Nocturne's Lotto.
Yeah, I think you're pretty much close to what I'm saying. The Luminosity and Nocturnes, I think, is a really good choice, just because I think Nocturnes has a real chance to really showcase their skills. And then SK No Ping, can SK is SK going to get knocked out? Like, right? So it's like, what's going on there? But there's not to say that any of these other matchups are going to be bad. These are all going to be really good matchups. There's a lot going on here. Out of all of the teams who are out of these like bottom teams, do you have any like dark horses that you think could really make a deep run in the placement round?
If we're talking international, I'd say Nocturnes is probably the dark horse of the international squads. If we're just talking overall in general, I still think that Luminosity has a really good chance of being kind of a dark horse in all of this. They can kind of really throw the wrench into the gears with their roster change at the end of the season. We haven't really gotten to see a whole lot of these pro players as of recently. I think that honestly, in that matchup alone, we could see either kind of dark horse going through, and then CLG is probably my next one into that one with their picking up a mask right before the season finished out there. I think that they have a real strong running.
I think it's kind of interesting that you highlighted Luminosity and then CLG, and then as well as Nocturnes as like your dark horses. And usually I look at Luminosity and they kind of are my dark horse, but I don't think they're really it for me this time around. I think I definitely agree with CLG. I think that's a very interesting squad. If they can really put it together, that's going to be strong. And then I kind of honestly I'm looking at Mouse, because they've been a team who have had a lot closer games to the top teams in EU than anybody else. They have been just one step away from really getting some decisive wins in that region. And I think that speaks a lot. I mean, they were able to take Dignitas to 70 something minutes the last week of the SPL. And I think that's going to be what I focus on those. I think CLG has a pretty good chance of doing something, but I think Mouse could really be the dark horse in this placement round, and kind of upset, especially now that Obey is going to be playing with a new mid laner. I think that could be huge. We might be seeing, the EU teams all across the board kind of make it. I could see Mouse really taking it to the face of SSG and knocking them out. Mouse is one of those teams that there's a lot of talent and a lot of potential there, and you see it come and go. And when they're on, they are on. And I think they could cause a lot of problems for some of these teams, especially. I think they could cause a lot of problems for SSG in particular. What do you think about that matchup between Mouse and SSG?
I think it's just the matchup of kind of whatever we feel might work versus meta. I think that's kind of the thing that we talked about with Mouse versus even Get on My Level, is they're both teams that kind of have this jank draft and this jank composition that they like to run just because, hey, let's just do this because why not? It sounds like it might work out for it, versus SSG, which has been I would call a very by the books team. It's not very often that we see them pulling out anything really crazy. They usually play something very straightforward, pretty much what you'd expect out of that team there. And going into it, I think that SSG needs to be prepared for that. Needs to be prepared for the fact that, this is EU, and EU and NA, while they have similar metas, they also have very differing play styles within that same meta. But Mouse doesn't follow really either of those. They kind of do their own thing. They are the do their own thing squad. And coming into a LAN setting has always really brought out the best of this squad. We see a lot of high-level play from the Mouse Boys online, but when it comes down to the LAN setting is where we really see them kind of go off here. So I think that this set could go either way. It just really comes down to if in my opinion, it comes down to if SSG can adapt to this kind of jank play style, because Mouse knows how to play against the meta. They play against the meta all of the time. It's just now, is SSG prepared to kind of play against not your standard meta? Kind of are they prepared to go against the ranked play style kind of thing?
Before they added Dimmy, I would have said that SSG is going to struggle a lot with Mouse, right? I would have said that Mouse probably gets the upper hand there. Now that they've added Dimmy, they've added another perspective on things. Space Station doesn't look as bad in that matchup in my eyes as they would have. But I still, I just, like I said, I look at Mouse and I really think that they could do a lot. I mean, this is a team that's like, I guess it's not anymore. I was going to say this is a team that's nearly made it several times, but at this point, this team has gone through a lot of different changes. I mean, at the core, Cheerio is just a guy who, once he gets to LAN, he finds that extra gear and just really goes even harder than he usually does. So I'm interested to see that. I don't know. At the end of the day, who do you see making it out of these placement rounds?
I want to have the idea that it's going to be 2-2, North America and Europe coming out of it. I think for me, NRG for sure is going to be one team coming out of this one. Originally, for me, it was NRG Obey. I'm a little more skeptical on Obey making it through. I'm kind of looking more towards Rival right now. I think that Obey still has a strong chance. Or not Energy. Energy's already made it. I'm silly.
It's already made it.
I'm silly. Energy's already made it. They'll make it. Don't worry. They'll make it, guys. I promise you they'll make it. Originally it was, Obey Rival, but now that Obey doesn't have their premier mid laner, it's kind of a bigger question mark for me. They're not as guaranteed anymore. I think that Mouse does have a really good chance of kind of being this upset for them and possibly pulling their way through. For sure, I do have Rival moving forward on the EU side. Onto the North American side, I really can't say SSG wholeheartedly at 100%, just because of their potential matchup against Mouse and then how they fare on the lower end of the bracket if they do end up losing to Mouse. But SSG is in there for me for North America. CLG, I think, is one of my teams I see making it to LAN. Just because of the addition of Mask on their roster, I think really kind of fits the playstyle that they've needed. Not the playstyle they had or the playstyle they wanted, the playstyle that they need more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Mask is going to be that. I think he's going to be that definitive shot caller for the team now. He's going to be the one saying, we're going to do this, no questions asked. Follow me and let's see what can go. Because from what I've noticed of that team, they're very up and down in their consistency, and a lot of that does depend on their jungle mid composition there. Final K never really has any problems in the solo lane. The duo lane never really, goes on a tear or feeds their brains out. The side lanes have always kind of been what I'd say stagnant at the time. It's where the mid and jungle kind of start fluctuating. And I think by putting Mask in there to help them out now is really going to improve that style of play that they've really been needing against some of these higher end teams. For me, I do have CLG moving out for the North American side. SSG is probably my second one with that, though, with a big possible question mark onto it. Rival for the EU side, and Mouse or Obey is still up in the air for me.
I think I could get behind that. I think I could see Space Station Counter Logic Gaming out of North America, and then if we're playing it safe, you see Space Station Counter Logic, and then you have Rival making it in, and that's the big toss up, the big question marks, the big possibilities are now between Obey and Mouse. I feel like there's just with Flippo coming in from mid, that's a big question. That's a big hit to Obey just on paper because we don't know what Flippo can do. So if I'm looking at it just from that, then Space Station Counter Logic Rival Mouse is probably what I would see. But I could also see it being Obey, Rival, and Mouse making it, and then you have either Trifecta or Counter Logic making it on the other side. It'll be really interesting to see how that really breaks down, and I'm really looking forward to these place rounds because at this stage you don't really know what's going to happen. this is basically, this is Worlds, right? So anything can happen. These placement rounds have a lot of different ideas, different play styles, all hitting together. And while we can basically look at Rival as shoe in right now, outside of that, it gets a little muddy, and
Mhm.
all of these teams can really, if they have the right groove, take games off of each other.
Right.
International is a little less so than that, but the North American and European teams, there's a lot of potential and opportunity there, and there could be some pretty significant upsets uh, if some teams kind of get caught unaware. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I don't know, like there's just so much there's so much
Mhm.
mystery around it. And I'm really excited about this new format, and I hope there's a lot more of this kind of stuff going forward. This makes World so much more exciting, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. I mean, kind of like the treading through the mud of the first couple of days of Worlds was getting through these placement rounds where that were always single game matchups. You get one chance, you win it, cool. You knock somebody out, now they got to play again. You lose, well, now you're kind of on the back burner for it. And day one always kind of felt like this really awkward mess of just international teams going up against mid, what at that time would be considered the mid-tier teams. They'd be going up against the third and fourth seeds of North America and Europe because they didn't even give all of the teams a chance to make it there. It was, if I remember correctly, it was the guaranteed first and second seeds in North America and Europe. Then it was the third and fourth, the two North American and European teams that come out of the super regionals, and then there was a wild card between another NA or EU team, and then it was all the international teams thrown into there. And SML wasn't even a factor at the time, or Challenger Circuit
Right.
then. So I think that this gives more teams a better opportunity to make it than previously, because in one game, in one pump games, it could just be a cheese game. Who gets a better early cheese comp, blows out the first 15 minutes of the game, and then there's no chance for them to ever recover from it. Versus now it's okay, we see what you did game one. Now let's see what we can do into game two. And then if you lose that, now you get another 2 games to try that out. So I think that this is by far the best format that we've seen for any of the world championships up until now.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I can't really say it much better myself. This is definitely the best format, and season 5 as a whole has had its ups and downs with some of the international stuff. We've kind of touched on that, but it largely feels like season 5 is really the competitive, where competitive kind of found its stride. Like, okay, we're moving in the right directions now. A lot of this
Mhm.
is just feel good changes, and I'm really excited to see what kind of gets announced as we move into the LAN, as we get looking towards season 6 and all the new changes and how they kind of address things. um, you know, Maybe we don't get too crazy. Maybe it's more of the same, but there's always that chance. Hi-Rez is one of those companies that, likes to make some big changes every once in a while. Moving into season 5 franchising, that was a big change, so hopefully we kind of get some more of that. Maybe we get some, more teams, uh, maybe we get some more roster apocalypse stuff. I don't know. Maybe like a trade thing. It'd be crazy if we did like a fantasy draft, over these kind of teams. Like break up all the rosters, do a fantasy draft, right? Like start from ground zero. That'd be kind of interesting. I'm not saying that's what's gonna happen or anything like that. Like that's probably on the impossible, never gonna happen side of the spectrum more than anything else. But you think about these things and like, how do we go forward? How do you make it more competitive? How do you do that? And so Hi-Rez is always looking at doing that, and they're not above doing some crazy shenanigans here and there. But I'm so excited for placement rounds starting tomorrow. Uh, it's
Tomorrow starts
we've been
console,
without
actually.
Smite. Does it console?
Yeah. Tomorrow is the start of the console matchups. It'll be the semifinals for Xbox and PS4 will play out. Then at DreamHack, I believe will be that'll technically be, I guess, technically be the quarterfinals, and then at DreamHack will be the semifinals, and then the grand finals of console this time is actually the top PS4 team and the top Xbox teams. I mean, that's going to be something that's a new
That's pretty
dynamic for Smite. For Paladins, that was the thing. The console wars have been around a
cool.
little while for Paladins, but now moving into Smite, finally having the chance of which console is truly superior. That's where we get to have a little bit of fun with that.
Really
So
excited for that, and I really, really, really want PS4 to win that. That would
amen.
just make my life right there. For all the Xbox kids to finally get the swift boot by the PS4 kids. Oh, that'd be the greatest thing in the world. But yeah, like you said, tomorrow is the start of console, the 5th, so Monday is
Yep.
the start for the placement round. Sorry, I got excited. We've been without Smite. I've been more with Smite for a bit now because I've been doing the NACE stuff, but largely competitive hasn't happened for a little while now. And how we go from the meta being so razor focused on this and maybe seeing it branch out a little bit, but that's a question we'll get answered very soon. So that's it for our talk of the placement rounds. I'm just kind of trying to vamp and fill time here, and I realize that now. I don't have anything else to say. JMac, thanks for joining me again. Is there anything you want to say before we kind of wrap this up?
Watch Smite. That's all I can really say is just watch these placement rounds. Be there because these are going to be some of the better matchups, and they're only going to be 8 teams at Worlds now compared to the 14 or so we've seen in seasons past. This is bringing in the best of the best for the World Championships this time around. So be watching these placement rounds, and then especially watch DreamHack. You may see some surprises out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to pair it with JMac said. If you are a fan of Smite and you're going to be watching, the DreamHack games, you definitely got to watch these placement round games. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of new stuff you'll probably be seeing, and just the fact that we're going to see these international teams get more than one, pub stomp game under their belts is going to be important. And just seeing kind of how these kind of teams match up, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I feel like seeing some teams maybe grow while at this LAN. So do not miss out on this. Whatever you do, if you can find the time to watch it, definitely watch them. And that's really it for our show. I told you guys it was going to be a short show. We've covered everything in the last few weeks here, and then today was just really the rounds up. Next week, hopefully, we'll have an interview and we'll be able to talk about all the stuff that happened during the week, and we'll have a bunch to talk about. So my name is LHS. You can follow me at the Zecdick. He's JMac at _JMac Tucker. We both stream on the Smite Game Mixer channel as well as the High Res TV channel. We'll be updating that over the course of the next couple of weeks or so, just because of the placement rounds are happening and our streaming schedules are going to be kind of messed up by that. So just pay attention to our Twitter feeds, and I'm sure you'll get notes on that. And that's been Around the Battleground. We'll see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.